Welcome to the LaunchPreneur Experience Legal Edition. I'm your host, Fernanda Furman, Summit and Launch Strategist, also international speaker. And today I am so grateful to be talking to Mariam Tsaturyan. I don't know. I tried to say her name many times. That was my best this time. She's an intellectual property and contracts attorney for entrepreneurs and creatives. And in this event, she's going to be talking about how to choose a name for your business, brand, products, or services so that you can protect them and not infringe on anybody else's rights. And welcome, Mariam. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here. I'm excited to be here.
So can you share with the audience a little bit about your background and why they wanted to watch your presentation?
Sure. Yeah. Well, hello, everybody. As Faye introduced, I'm Mariam Tsaturyan, and I specialize in trademarks, copyright, and contract law. I got my start in intellectual property and contracts quite by accident. To be honest with you, it was completely based on the need of my audience. I started blogging after I closed down my legal practice because I had a kid, who was 7 months old at the time. So I had to make that hard decision to become a stay-at-home mom and watch over him. And I started blogging. I started blogging about mom topics. I was a mom, I was home, I was bored. So, that's what I was talking about. And little by little, my audience who were commenting on this, really weird mom topic blog posts, because it just wasn't me, but I was trying to kill the time with it. And they found out I was an attorney, and I kept getting comments from them and emails from them telling me, what are you doing talking about mom topics when there are so many bloggers and entrepreneurs out there who need an advice from an attorney? And this was 4 or 5 years ago, mind you, when we didn't have as many attorneys in this space as we do now. So it was still pretty new for attorneys to be doing this. So I was like, they are right. I took down my mommy blog website. I created another one, and I started blogging about legal topics. I have invested a lot of time and resources into learning all the ins and outs of the business, every kind of little specialty and nook that entrepreneurs might need in this space. And one thing led to another. Then those people reading my blog posts started asking for contracts and policies. And then they started asking for intellectual property services like trademarks and copyrights. So as you can see, it was like a snowball effect. One thing led to another, quite by accident, but a happy accident that I will never regret. So here you have me about 5 years later. I specialize in intellectual property, and I work exclusively with entrepreneurs and creatives. That's my story.
Oh, that's amazing. I love how, things just happen for you in a way that led you here. And it's so needed right now. This is a service that I believe that there's so many of us that are, I'm a former architect. So I became, a launch and summit strategist 2 or 3 years ago. And just like me during the pandemic, so many new coaches, entrepreneurs, creatives are coming to the online space, and we have zero ideas about how do we protect ourselves? How do we even get a name? And then everything you type is already taken. It's crazy. Oh, I got this amazing name. You type, it's already taken. Or if it is taken, you don't even know if they already have any protection on it, if they're just using it, right? But there's no trademark. So I'm very looking forward to your presentation to learn about how do we pick the names, and how do we find out about if that's a good name for a brand, if it is protected, or how can we protect our business names, our programs and course names. So looking forward to it.
Thank you. Me too. I'm excited. I love that topic, and I've presented this on a few occasions, like this particular topic. And this is a hit every time, because what we're going to talk about during the presentation is sort of the building blocks for everything else that comes. So you want to make sure you get this step correct. You want to make sure that you have the foundation very strong from the very beginning, as opposed to trying to fix it later on. So hopefully a lot of you will benefit from this.
Yes, I love it. And She's going to be in a group. Make sure that you connect with her.
Yep. And I do have something that I want our audience to do, Faye. I want you all to go to the LaunchPreneur Experience Facebook group. Create a post, tag me in it if you can, Mariam Tsaturyan. It's difficult, I know, but bear with me. And I want you to answer this question. Have you thought about registering a trademark for your brand, whether it's logo, your business name, your brand name, your slogan, anything that has to do with your brand? Yes, no, if no, why not? I'd love to read your responses.
Thank you so much. And we see you all inside of the group.
Welcome back, everybody. So as mentioned in a short introduction, today's video is going to teach you about the foundations of choosing a name for your business, for your brand, for your product, services, whatever it is that you come up with that represents you, that represents your brand and you need to name. Today's presentation will be on that topic. In other words, a lot of entrepreneurs spent time thinking about names. However, the way a lot of these people think about names is not the correct way. Now, what do I mean by that? They think about a name that might sound catchy, that might be easy to remember, or that might give a hint as to what their services or businesses are about. They're thinking about unique or easy or catchy rather than, is this name protectable? Can I register a trademark for this name? Or is this name actually infringing on somebody else's existing trademark? So for all of these questions, if you've had any of those previously, or if you might have them going forward, since you might come up with new products and services, or you might create new businesses, today's presentation is going to help you with that. So make sure to stay tuned. Now, let's start in the very beginning. I'm going to answer one question first because, some people say, well, what if I don't care about registering my trademark at this point? Do I still need to go through these stages? Yes. Even if you don't want to register your trademark, which, by the way, is a big no-no as an entrepreneur, as a business owner. We'll get to that in a little bit. But even if you're not ready yet to do that, you still need to go through these steps when choosing a name. It doesn't matter whether you're registering a trademark or not. These steps will ensure that the name you choose will be protectable and that you're not infringing on somebody else's trademark in the meantime. Right? So let's start. When we're talking about names for your business, your brand, your product, your services, any real offering that you have, we need to keep in mind this thing we call spectrum of distinctiveness when it comes to trademarks. Now, spectrum of distinctiveness, think of it as a straight line, right, that has different levels. On one end, it's essentially the names that are incredibly weak and not protected under trademark. And then as it progresses from one side to the other, we get, stronger names, stronger trademarks, and brand identity kind of characteristics. And those names are obviously, they get really strong protection. Now let's go from weakest to the strongest, and I'll tell you what's the best place to end up in. At the weakest level, we have generic names. Now, generic names are everyday, commonly used phrases that you as a business owner might need to use, that I as a business owner might need to use, or just, words that we talk about stuff. For example, aspirin, right? Aspirin used to be a trademark for a painkiller. The medication itself was a painkiller medication. Aspirin was the brand, but it just became generic because a lot of people started using aspirin for a common pain reliever. So it lost its uniqueness, it lost its protection, and now aspirin is a generic term. Anybody can use that term. If we're talking about pain relievers, pain relief pills, like medications out there, if you go to a pharmacy and you say, Do you have aspirin? They're not going to look for a particular bottle that says aspirin on it. They'll just give you any kind of pain reliever and they'll tell you this is it. This is aspirin. And that's what we're talking about when we say generic words. These are words that everybody uses, everybody needs to use. So because everybody needs to use, we can't protect these words. We can't tell them, hey, this word is registered. You can't use that because it's generic. Now, the second level, these are the descriptive words or descriptive marks. As the name suggests, these types of names describe either what it is you do, a characteristic of your business, characteristic of the services, or the actual business or product or services themselves. So this is, when you name a business name to be merely descriptive, it's not going to get protection most of the time. There are some exceptions, like sometimes you can argue that even though this is merely descriptive, due to your, let's say, publicity stunts, due to your marketing efforts, this brand name has gained a secondary meaning. That's why it should be protected. So sometimes you'll be lucky and you can argue that if you have actual basis, but generally speaking, merely descriptive names do not get protection either, right? So far we had generic and we had merely descriptive. Now the third level is where I suggest most small businesses should end up if they're thinking about a name. And this naming process is where most business owners go wrong, because this step, if not done correctly, if from the very beginning you choose a name that is not the best fit for your business, and it comes with lots of red flags and problems, then you've started a business on very shaky ground. And down the line, you can be sure that you're going to have issues because of that. And it's going to cost you a lot down the line too. So let's get back to the suggestive names. Now, as the name suggests, these names suggest what your business or services or products are about, but they don't describe it and they're not generic terms. For example, let's take Netflix. Netflix is a suggestive term. It's a suggestive mark. When you hear it, you kind of understand what it's about because you can take apart the words like Netflix, network, flicks, like videos online, but it doesn't say streaming videos online or movies online or watching movies online. It says Netflix. So what they've done is they've used a little bit of creativity when coming out with this name, but they still kept the name fairly suggestive so that when somebody hears Netflix, they kind of know what that business is about. They're not wondering, like, what is Netflix about? What is Netflix? Is it a jewelry store? Like, we kind of know what to expect. But because of that little bit of creativity involved, suggestive names get trademark protection. This is where most small business owners should end up. This is the sweet spot. Why do I say this is a sweet spot? Are there better, stronger trademarks? Absolutely. But this is a sweet spot for most small businesses because it's fairly easy to create brand awareness when you have a suggestive name. Because once again, the name suggests what your business is about. Therefore, it's easier to create that brand awareness around your products and services. Yet it's creative where it's not just describing what you do and it's not a generic phrase. Therefore, it gets that trademark protection. Now, when we talk about the next two levels, you'll understand why I suggest that suggestive names are the sweet spot and what I mean by that. So the next level after suggestiveness is arbitrary marks. Now, arbitrary marks are the brands that take an existing word and apply it to their business. And this word has nothing to do with their business. In other words, they apply the words arbitrarily, therefore the name, to their businesses and services. Now, an example of this is Apple, like the Apple company with their iPhones and, MacBooks and everything. Because Apple existed, the word Apple existed. Fruits, apple orchards, we know what Apple means. But what did this tech company do? They took a word that has nothing to do with technology, and they applied it to their company that creates technology. Now, in order to create that brand awareness for people, that when somebody says Apple computers or Apple phones, we don't automatically think like fruit phones. Like, what is that? Maybe like, phones made out of gummy bears that look like apples. Like, we don't think that. We know we're talking about the company Apple. Why? Well, because Apple company spent hundreds of millions of dollars on marketing, campaigning, and promotions, publicity, so that whenever people hear the word Apple computers, Apple phones, iPhones, MacBooks, whatnot, they automatically associate it with the tech company as opposed to with the fruit. So, but here's the thing, companies like Apple, companies like Coca-Cola, like, Nike, the ones who are multi-million or multi-billion dollar industries, those companies have the unlimited resources necessary to spend in order to create that brand awareness for their consumers, for the public, so that they don't automatically think Apple fruit and they actually think Apple technology. If it's a small business that has very like finite resources, their funds are limited, they don't have the capability of this big like multi-billion-dollar companies, they can only spend so much on publicity and marketing and promotions, they're not going to be very successful at creating that brand awareness with the public, with their users and consumers. This is the reason why I say that suggestive names for most small businesses are the sweet spot, because it's easier to create that brand awareness merely based on the fact that the name suggests what you do. So it's easier to get the word out there. But with, if money wasn't an issue, if you had unlimited resources, then obviously arbitrary names are great. Go for it. Now, the next level after arbitrary marks, we have fanciful marks. And fanciful marks are the strongest marks you can have. Fanciful marks are words that did not exist. These are words that were specifically created to be applied towards that business, for their products, for their services. These are made up words. There's nothing stronger than this. For example, Kodak or Xerox, right? These are trademarks. These are brands that mean absolutely nothing outside of the actual products and services that they're applied to. They don't have an independent meaning like Apple, for example, or like Amazon, for example, right? So these are made up words. And as you can probably imagine, because these are made up words, because these have been specifically created to only apply to that business, to that brand, to their products and services, this would be very, very strong marks. But because these are made up names at the same time, there are now more hurdles to overcome in creating that public awareness, that brand identity that you need as a company, that you need when creating a trademark for yourself. This word did not exist. Nobody knows what this word means. So just imagine how much more resources you have to put towards marketing and publicity and promotions and advertising in order to create that awareness that when somebody hears this made up like gibberish that they don't even know what that means, they automatically associate it with that particular company, with that particular business and their product and services. Again, similar with the arbitrary names, fanciful names are more well suited for those companies that have like multi-billion dollar industries. We're talking about pharmaceuticals. Like pharmaceutical companies do this a lot. They create names for their like medications, each individual pill. Like they come up with various names that mean absolutely nothing, but they applied it to their medications and they protect them. They can do that. Again, multi-billion dollar companies. But a small business that, maybe earns 6 to 7 figures a year or, maybe less, they don't have this unlimited resources. So stick to suggestive names. This is going to be the sweet spot for most of you watching this. Like a little bit of creativity with a name that kind of suggests what it is that you do or what your services or products are about, or maybe even a function of it. but you're not describing it, okay? You are suggesting it. So think of it along those lines. Now, we have this spectrum out of the way. Hopefully this made sense to you in terms of what kinds of names you should choose. Now, let's get to the next stage. Let's say, okay, we know that we need to come up with suggestive names. But how do we make sure that the names that we actually pick are going to be the good ones? Here's where mistake number 2 comes into play for most entrepreneurs. Number 1, remember, was not choosing a name based on the spectrum of distinctiveness. In other words, choosing a generic or descriptive names instead of suggestive or after. Number 2 mistake that most entrepreneurs make is that they become attached to one name too quickly, too early on in the process, and they don't want to change their minds. Meaning they might come up with something that sounds great. It's catchy. It's interesting. They think people will immediately like this, or they think they can get a great domain name with that name. And they get like super attached to that without having done any of the work necessary, right? And sometimes most business people stop right there. They come up with the name that they like. They see domain names is available for that. They think their job is done. Or maybe they'll do like a quick social media search. If the account names, like usernames, are not taken with that name, they think their job is done. Like that's what they should stop. Now, once again, this is not where you should stop. This is a long process, mind you. This is not something that you can do in 2 minutes or sometimes even 1 hour. This might take hours, or depending how thorough you want to be, it might even take several hours or a day. But this absolutely is a step that you should not forgo because it will save you a lot of headache down the line. So what do we do? So first things first, you come up with several names, not one. Get your pen and paper, start jotting down, brainstorming several names. Ideally, you want at least 5 names on that paper, or, open a document on your computer, whatever you're comfortable with. Come up with at least 5 suggestive names that you would be okay with if these were the names for your business. You can have your favorites, but again, do not get attached to any of them too early on because we need to go through a process of elimination now. Once you write down these 5 names, 3 to 5 names, your next step would be to come up with common variation forms for each one of these names. We're talking about common spelling variations, misspelling variations, phonetically sounding words, meaning words that sound the same but might have different spellings and different meanings. Doesn't matter, but they sound the same. Plurals versus singulars, words written together versus words written with spaces, words written with dashes. So come up with as many variations as you can. For example, if I was to trademark a name that had the word business in it, right? Let's say one of the words was business. I would make sure that I had business the way it's regularly spelled, that I had business like with B-I-Z-N-E-Z, B-I-Z-N-E-S. I would make sure that I had the word biz, B-I-Z. Any other common variations that you've seen on social media, that you've seen as hashtags, any variation that people use in their daily lives, I would use those variations for all of the things that you have on there. This is a process that will require brain power. You actually need to sit down and think, but come up with as many variations as you can. And then if you have a name that consists of like 2-3 different names, different orders for those names too, right? For example, if Entrepreneur Legal Corner, instead of that, you could do Legal Entrepreneur Corner of Entrepreneur Legal. You could come up with different orders, different methods of spelling that, writing that, so that you have as many variations as possible. Now, once you do that for all of these individual 5 names that you've brainstormed, the next step is to start doing the actual search. Now, for this, you would go to uspto.gov. When you go there, you will see a tab for trademarks. Hover over that, it will give you the options for trademark searches. From there, when you click on it, it'll take you to the test, the trademark electronic search system database, and you can start doing your searches. Now, fair warning, the method that I'm teaching you is for you to do a manual search. These are steps that we do as attorneys, but obviously we're trained, a little bit more or better in doing the searches. But aside from that, we also use, this is full like transparency disclaimer, we also use third-party AI softwares to help us with the search. Why? Because the trademark database is very much like an Excel spreadsheet. If you're like a basic Excel spreadsheet user, then you probably like the most you do with it is just go fill out some columns, like enter some data there. If you're an advanced Excel spreadsheet user, you probably know a whole bunch of formulas that you can enter there and make your spreadsheet do some magical things like, calculations and act as a calculator and CRM system. Like I've seen a lot of I'm a basic spreadsheet user, so I don't know what's possible with it, but I've seen some incredible spreadsheets and I know that they're heavily formula based. I could never do that. But why am I saying this? Because the trademark database is very similar to Excel spreadsheet in a sense that you need to know specific formulas and codes in order when doing a search to bring out the widest possible results on your search. If you just search for what you have, you're going to have very narrow results. And this is the reason why when somebody comes to me to register a trademark and they tell me, I've done a search myself, I don't want you to run a search, just register the trademark to start the application, I won't do it, because their search means nothing when it comes to trademark protection. I have to do my AI search because the AI search gives me literally thousands, if not tens of thousands of results that I don't get on a regular USPTO database. So anyways, but I digress. Now, the steps that I'm teaching you, these are still 100% better to do than not to do. You are still going to be ahead of the game by doing the steps that I'm teaching you of most of your competitors than if you weren't doing this, because most business owners don't put the time necessary in doing these steps because it is boring, because it is time consuming. Nobody wants to do that, but you should, because it will save you a lot of headache. Now, what was I saying? I kind of lost the train of thought right there. The search option. So once on the trademark database, what you will do is first you will type the name that you have written down, the correct version for one of the 5 names that you have written down that you would, potentially be okay with to have as the name for your brand or business or product or service or whatever, any of those. Once you do that, most likely, an exact search will give you an error, or it will say there are no results found. But just because it says that, it doesn't mean that that particular name is safe to use. Here's where you need to get to the next stage, right? And this will be typing the variations of that particular name that you came up with one by one and looking through the results that it gives you. As an example for this, for example, I want to make sure you understand what it is that I mean when I say it'll give you an error, but it doesn't mean that it's safe to use. For example, if I wanted to hypothetically create a product and name it Starbucks, has no relation to coffee even, just, I wanted to name it Starbucks, but instead of spelling it Starbucks, like B-U-C-K-S at the end, let's say I spelled it Starbacks, like B-A-C-K-S at the end, right? And I went on USPTO's database and I searched for the word Starbacks and it gave me an error. You can do this yourself. You'll see that it gives you an error. It says no results found. Now, does that mean that it's okay for me to use the word Starbucks, maybe like to even open up my own coffee shop or sell coffee mugs, or just not even coffee, anything really? Absolutely not. You can be sure that Starbucks will come after me quicker than I'll fall asleep that night. The reason being is because just because the exact spelling is not there means absolutely nothing. Starbucks is similar enough to Starbucks that they'll come after you. It's just one letter of difference. And the similarity between the marks doesn't even just end with one letter. It can be words that are spelled completely differently. Completely differently. They don't share any common spellings together, but they might sound similar. Or one of the words or two of the words in that brand name might be similar to something else. So the trademark office finds a lot of similarities with terms that you wouldn't think they are similar, but unfortunately they happen to be. So this is the reason why you need to be super vigilant in your search. So search through the variations that you've created for each one of those individual names. If nothing pops up, great. Now you're ready to get to the next stage. However, if at this variation stage, something comes up that looks to be kind of similar to what you're searching, well, guess what? If something popped up at this very basic stage that you're just doing on USPTO's database yourself without having any legal analysis background and knowledge backing you to do that search the way it's supposed to be done, chances are that mark is not a good fit because you already found the red flag. So move on, scratch it out, get to the next option. Start doing the same exact results with the next option. Once you go through the USPTO database search result, let's say from 5, you have narrowed it down to, I don't know, maybe 3 or 2 names that you could potentially use because you didn't find red flags with them. Well, your next stage would be to do domain name search. And you can use something like name search, namesearch.com, GoDaddy.com. They all have that ability to search for domain names. Ideally, you want the domain name to be available. So just because the domain name is not available doesn't mean that that brand is not available, but a lot of people use the same name for their domain name as for their brand. So that's the red flag. If the domain name is not available, you want to steer clear of that. You, at least at the stage where you're just starting to pick, and you want to pick something that has a domain name available. Once you cross that bridge too, you'll probably have less options left. So at that point, you want to do a social media search for the accounts to see what's available, what's not, what's taken. And once you narrow that down too, well, then you have the name. You have a name that is relatively safe to use for your purposes, and it'll be protected. Now, the last step is to do a total Google search. And I would do this search in incognito mode, not on your regular Google browser, because your regular Google browser saves a lot of cookies, saves your history, your location. So the results it shows you are most likely going to be influenced by the searches you've done previously. It will not be clean results that you can get. So do a private mode or incognito mode, whatever browser you use, and search for that name. Just see what comes up. Sometimes there are some local businesses that have been using that mark for a while without ever registering it, that you need to be aware about. Just because there is something doesn't mean that, this is done, you can't use it, but you want to be aware of this details as well. So once you do that, now you have your mark. Now you're sure that you're not infringing on anybody else's trademark, at least as sure as you can be without paying an attorney to run a professional search for you. But again, by doing the steps, you are 90% ahead of your competition because they will not put in the time to do the steps. They will think about 1 or 2 catchy names and they'll pick the catchiest one with the domain name available. And that's all they'll do. I can guarantee you that much. So there you have it. This is how you pick a name that can be protected and that will not infringe on somebody else's trademark. Now, I do have a guide. It's a free guide that I put together that will walk you through the steps in more detail, and there'll be links. It's a PDF guide, and you can get your hands on that somewhere around this video. The link will probably be below this video. You can sign up with your name and email, and you'll get that guide in your email as well. It is a great complimentary resource to this video, and I hope that this session has been helpful to you. I hope that you walk away from this with more knowledge than you came before. And if you have any questions or need any clarifications, feel free to comment in the Facebook group, tag me in it, and I'll make sure to respond to all of you. Thank you so much.